It all started on a quiet Saturday morning. I was sipping my coffee, watching the mist rise off my creek, the way I always do after a long week. The serenity of my property had always been my escape, a place where time seemed to slow down. But that morning, something felt off. Something in the stillness of the water, the way the sunlight hit the ripples. It wasn't right. I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the far end of my property. And that's when I saw her. A woman, mid-40s, sharply dressed in bright fishing gear, was setting up what looked like a fancy little dock right in the middle of my creek. At first I thought maybe it was a new neighbor or a weekend guest. But as I watched, she began hammering stakes into the water, spreading a tarp, and setting up what could only be described as a private fishing spot. My stomach dropped. This is my creek. I had spent years maintaining it, ensuring the banks were clean, the water flowed freely, and the fish had a safe habitat. And here was someone, boldly, claiming it as her own. I walked closer, trying to see if she had any kind of permit, any documentation that would somehow justify this. But there was nothing. Not a single piece of paper. Just her, smiling as if she had every right to stake a claim to my property. Curiosity turned to frustration, and frustration quickly turned to anger. I tried speaking to her from the bank. "Excuse me, ma'am, this is private property," I called out. She looked up, startled for a second, then waved dismissively. "Oh, I'm just setting up a little spot to enjoy the morning," she said, with that smug, too-perfect tone. Hope it's okay. It wasn't okay. Not even close. I felt a surge of disbelief. Who does she think she is, taking over someone else's land? But the situation was bigger than my anger. I realized that what she had done wasn't just rude. It was illegal. She was essentially trespassing and altering the waterway, which could have legal consequences. My mind raced with questions. How long had she been planning this? How did she even get away with it unnoticed until now? I knew I had to document everything. I grabbed my phone, snapping photos and videos, capturing her setup from every angle. If this was going to escalate, I needed proof. And something told me the story wasn't just about a dock. It was about exposing the audacity of someone thinking they could rewrite the rules just because they wanted to. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. Her illegal fishing paradise would soon unravel in ways she could never imagine. I decided I couldn't just stand by. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This was my property, my creek, and someone had audaciously claimed it as their own. I walked closer, my phone in hand, ready to document every move. But as I approached, I noticed something strange. The dock wasn't anchored properly. Parts of it were held together by ropes, some stakes barely digging into the muddy creek bed. It looked makeshift, almost like it wasn't meant to last. "Ma'am, I really need you to leave," I said, raising my voice so she could hear over the water. She turned slowly, that same irritatingly calm smile plastered across her face. "Relax. It's just a little fishing spot," she said, waving as if that excuse could erase the fact that she was trespassing. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "You don't understand. This is private property. You can't just come here and build whatever you want. This is illegal." Her response? A scoff, followed by a remark that made my blood boil. "Well, the creek is public water, isn't it? Technically I can fish here." Her tone implied that she had done her homework, but she clearly didn't know the whole story. That's when I realized that this wasn't just an innocent fishing setup. She had gone through the trouble of constructing a little paradise for herself, thinking she could get away with it because the water ran through my property. I stepped closer, showing her my photos and pointing out the stakes and modifications she had made. "Look at what you've done here. You've altered the creek, disrupted the wildlife, and trespassed. You could be fined or worse." Her expression faltered for a moment, just a flicker, but then she laughed nervously. "Oh, it's not a big deal. I'll take it down eventually." That's when I knew this wasn't going to be easy. She wasn't just clueless. She was brazenly defiant. I decided it was time to gather more evidence. I circled the creek, taking notes on the alterations she had made, snapping photos of the fish traps she had laid out, and documenting everything in real time. I even noticed small signs of erosion where she had removed natural plants along the bank. This wasn't just trespassing, it was environmental damage. By the end of the morning, I had a stack of photos, videos, and detailed notes. I knew I had enough evidence to make a case if it came to that. But the question that lingered in my mind was bigger. How long had she been planning this? And did she think she could really get away with it? One thing was certain. Exposing her illegal fishing setup was no longer optional. I needed answers. And she was about to get caught in a web of her own making. I knew I had to act fast. The longer she stayed, the more entrenched her illegal setup became, and the harder it would be to reverse the damage. I decided to gather even more proof. I spent the afternoon quietly observing from a distance, watching her carefully manage her little fishing paradise. She had even brought a cooler and a folding chair, clearly planning to spend hours there. Every action she took only confirmed what I already suspected. She had been thinking she could claim my creek for herself without consequences. Then I noticed something that made my jaw drop. Hidden behind a cluster of bushes near the creek, she had nailed a small sign that read, "Private Fishing Zone. No trespassing." It wasn't just audacious, it was bold, almost comical. She was treating my property like it belonged to her, trying to establish ownership through intimidation. That sign would be the key piece of evidence. I continued documenting everything, capturing video of her moving equipment, securing the dock, and setting bait traps in the water. The more I recorded, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a casual fishing trip. It was a carefully orchestrated takeover. Next, I decided to check local property and waterway records. As I suspected, there was no permit for her structure, no record of her making any legal claim, nothing that could even remotely justify her presence. My creek was mine, legally and rightfully, and everything she had done violated multiple local and environmental laws. Armed with photos, videos, and documents, I finally confronted her again. This time I brought printed evidence of the property lines and the environmental regulations she had violated. Her confident smirk faltered when she saw the papers. You can't prove anything," she muttered. But her voice lacked conviction. I calmly explained, "Every stake, every alteration, every trap you set is documented. You've trespassed, altered the waterway, and violated property laws. This isn't just a warning anymore. If you don't remove everything immediately, I will escalate this." Her face went pale. She tried to laugh it off, but the tone was nervous this time, shaky. I could see her confidence crumbling with each piece of evidence I laid out. The dock that once seemed so secure now looked like a flimsy trap, her perfect fishing paradise unraveling under the weight of proof and legality. By the time the sun began to set, I knew the situation had shifted. What started as a quiet Saturday morning by my creek had turned into a battle of audacity versus accountability. Her illegal setup was exposed, her bluff called, and her sense of entitlement confronted. The question now was simple. How far would she go to defend a setup that was entirely unsanctioned? And more importantly, would I let her get away with it? The next morning, I returned to the creek, determined to see whether she had taken any action. The dock was still there, though noticeably shaky, as if it had been hastily reinforced overnight. She was there too, trying to appear calm. But the tension in her body language was obvious. Her confident smirk from the previous day was gone, replaced by a nervous defensive stance. I approached slowly, phone in hand, to document everything. "You need to remove this immediately," I said firmly. "I've already documented all your violations. If this isn't dismantled today, I'll be forced to involve local authorities." Her reaction was almost cinematic. She paused, eyes darting around, clearly realizing that her bluff had been called. Then came a half-hearted, I guess I can take it down," but it lacked conviction. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. While she hesitated, I began taking close-up photos of her dock, her traps, and the sign she had nailed up proclaiming ownership over my creek. Every detail mattered. What happened next was almost surreal. She started trying to dismantle the dock herself, fumbling with nails and ropes as I recorded. Her once pristine fishing setup quickly fell apart. Boards clattering into the water, ropes tangling, and the private fishing zone sign toppling into the mud. Each piece that came down felt like a small victory, not just for me, but for accountability. As she struggled, I calmly explained the gravity of the situation. "You've trespassed, altered the waterway, and violated property laws. This isn't just about a dock. It's about respecting boundaries and consequences." Her attempts to argue fell flat. Her frustration was visible, and the reality of facing legal exposure finally seemed to sink in. By mid-afternoon, the creek was clear again. The dock, traps, and signs were gone, leaving the water and banks just as they had been before her intrusion. I took one last sweep with my camera, documenting the restored creek as a reminder of both the violation and the resolution. Reflecting on the experience, I realized this was more than just a conflict over property. It was a lesson in vigilance, patience, and standing firm when someone tries to claim what isn't theirs. Sometimes, people think rules don't apply to them. But when confronted with evidence, accountability, and persistence, even the boldest schemes can unravel. As for her, well, she quietly packed up and left, likely learning, though probably grudgingly, that audacity cannot replace respect for the law. My creek was back to its peaceful state, and I could finally enjoy it again, knowing that the illegal setup had been exposed and corrected. And the lesson here is clear. Boundaries matter, and so does taking action when someone crosses them. The creek is calm again, but the story of Karen's failed fishing takeover will live on. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more wild Karen encounters, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment below telling us what you would do in this situation.